Alien warrior versus humans, a nightmare battle. Commander stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Void Render, watching the small blue planet rotate slowly beneath him. His four arms crossed in what his species considered a gesture of supreme confidence. The Oran Empire had conquered 17 star systems in the past decade, and their warriors were feared across 3 galactic sectors. Earth would be just another trophy. Admiral, his tactical officer hissed through razor-sharp teeth. The human planet shows minimal defensive capabilities. Their orbital installations are primitive, their fleet consists of chemical propulsion vessels, and their planetary shields are virtually non-existent. His mandibles clicked in amusement. The humans had only recently achieved faster-than-light travel, still relying on crude fusion drives and kinetic weapons. His own ships used quantum manipulation drives and plasma cannons that could melt through armor. This would be over before the humans even understood what was happening. "Deploy the Terror Doctrine," commanded. The Terror Doctrine was the Empire's standard conquest protocol, a devastating orbital bombardment followed by ground forces that would systematically eliminate any resistance. It had never failed. Down on Earth, in the underground command center beneath the Rocky Mountains, General Sarah stared at the tactical displays with grim determination. Humanity had known this day would come eventually. For 50 years, they had monitored deep space communications, learning about the galactic community and the various empires that dominated it. The Oran Empire was one of the most ruthless. "How long until they reach firing position?" asked her aide. 18 hours, General. Their fleet is holding at the edge of our solar system, probably analyzing our defenses. Nodded, let them analyze. What they would find was exactly what humanity wanted them to find: a primitive civilization barely capable of defending itself. The real defenses were hidden, buried deep underground, or disguised as civilian installations. Humanity had learned the hard way that sometimes the best strategy was to appear weak when you were strong. The first lesson humans had learned from monitoring galactic communications was that most alien species fought wars the same way they had for. They relied on overwhelming technological superiority, massive fleets, and the psychological impact of their reputation. They had grown comfortable, predictable. They fought clean wars with clean rules. Humans fought dirty. Dr. James Reeves sat in his laboratory 3 miles beneath the Nevada desert, making final adjustments to what the project team simply called the package. For 20 years, he had worked on humanity's ultimate insurance policy, a weapon that most of his colleagues considered too dangerous to exist. But as he watched the alien fleet positioning itself above Earth, he knew they had no choice. The package wasn't a traditional weapon. It was a convergence of human ingenuity, desperation, and the kind of thinking that made other species nervous about humanity even when they were allies. While aliens had focused on bigger guns and stronger armor, humans had focused on understanding the fundamental laws of physics and finding ways to exploit them. "Dr. Reeves," his assistant called from across the lab, "General is requesting final confirmation on deployment readiness." Reeves looked at the device one more time. It looked almost innocent, a metallic sphere about the size of a basketball, covered in what appeared to be simple sensor arrays. Inside, however, was a miniature quantum field generator that could do things to space-time that would make theoretical physicists weep. He had based the design on principles discovered by studying gravitational anomalies near black holes, then scaled it down and weaponized it. "Tell the General we're ready," he said quietly. Above Earth's atmosphere, the Oran fleet moved into attack formation, studied the human planet with growing satisfaction. Intelligence reports indicated that humans were a young species, barely 2 centuries past their industrial age. They had achieved space flight through brute force engineering rather than elegant physics manipulation like civilized species. Their weapons were crude but effective against other primitive civilizations. What didn't know was that human, brute force engineering had led them down technological paths that more advanced species had never explored. While aliens perfected energy manipulation and gravitational control, humans had become experts at exploiting loopholes in the laws of physics that other species considered too dangerous or unethical to pursue. The first sign that something was wrong came when the Oran sensors detected unusual quantum fluctuations from Earth's surface. The readings made no sense. It appeared that humans were manipulating space-time itself, something that should have been impossible for such a primitive species. Sir, the tactical officer reported, his voice showing the first hint of uncertainty. We're detecting massive energy buildups at multiple points across the human planet. The energy signatures are unlike anything in our databases. His confidence wavered slightly. In all his years of conquest, he had never encountered unknown technology. The Oran Empire had conquered species with plasma weapons, quantum torpedoes, even primitive antimatter devices. But these readings suggested something entirely different. "Begin bombardment immediately," he ordered. "Eliminate those energy sources before they can deploy whatever weapons they're preparing." The first wave of plasma bolts streaked down toward Earth, each one carrying enough energy to level a human city. They struck the planet's upper atmosphere and simply vanished. Not absorbed, not deflected, they disappeared entirely as if they had never existed. In the command center, General watched the alien weapons disappear into the quantum void fields that Dr. Martinez's team had developed. The fields didn't block the weapons. They redirected them into parallel dimensions where they harmlessly dispersed. It was a technology that had taken humanity 30 years to develop and could only be maintained for a few hours at a time. "Phase 1 is working," reported to her staff. "The aliens are confused and probably escalating to heavier weapons. Dr. Reeves, are you ready for Phase 2? "Package is armed and ready for deployment," came the reply from deep underground. "Just give us the coordinates." Was no longer amused. His fleet had just unleashed enough firepower to sterilize a continent, and it had simply vanished. Worse, his sensors were now detecting human vessels rising from the planet's surface, ships that, according to all intelligence reports, shouldn't exist. The human ships looked wrong. Where Iran vessels were sleek and elegant, designed for maximum energy efficiency, the human ships appeared to be cobbled together from scrap metal and salvaged components. They moved erratically, without the smooth precision that marked an advanced civilization's technology. But they kept coming. "Sir, the human vessels are not following any known combat patterns," his tactical officer reported. "They appear to be improvising." That was exactly what they were doing. Human military doctrine had been developed around the principle that in any conflict with an advanced alien species, humanity would be outnumbered and outmatched in terms of raw technology. So instead of trying to match alien capabilities, humanity had focused on being unpredictable. The human ships didn't follow standard attack vectors because they weren't using standard propulsion. Each vessel was equipped with what human engineers called chaos drives, propulsion systems that randomly altered their output every few seconds, making it impossible for enemy targeting computers to predict their movement. The ships looked cobbled together because each one was unique, built from whatever materials were available and armed with whatever weapons the crew could acquire or build. To an alien commander used to facing organized fleets with predictable tactics, fighting humans was like trying to fight a swarm of angry bees while blindfolded. The first human ship to reach weapons range opened fire with what appeared to be a simple kinetic cannon. The projectile struck flagship's shields and bounced off harmlessly, exactly as expected. The second projectile, fired from the same ship 3 seconds later, passed through the shields as if they weren't there and punched a hole clean through the hull. "How is that possible?" demanded. His science officer's voice was shaking. "Sir, the humans appear to be using variable frequency kinetic rounds. The first shot was designed to analyze our shield harmonics. The second was tuned to the exact frequency needed to bypass them." Stared at the tactical display in disbelief. Variable frequency kinetic rounds were theoretically possible, but they required incredibly sophisticated manufacturing capabilities and real-time quantum analysis. No species that still used chemical rockets should have been able to develop such technology. What he didn't understand was that humans had approached the problem from the opposite direction. Instead of developing more sophisticated manufacturing, they had developed weapons that could modify themselves in flight. The kinetic rounds contained tiny AI cores that could analyze target defenses and physically restructure the projectile's molecular composition during transit. It was the kind of insane, dangerous technology that most civilized species would never develop because it was too likely to malfunction and destroy the user. Humans had developed it because they were desperate, and because they had a cultural tendency to build things that other species considered too crazy to work. The battle was now in full swing. and it was unlike anything in its experience. Human ships appeared and disappeared seemingly at random, striking at his fleet with weapons that classification. Some ships fired conventional plasma bolts, others launched what appeared to be metal debris that somehow pierced advanced armor, and still others deployed devices that seemed to cause Iran ships to simply stop functioning without any apparent damage. "Sir, we've lost 30% of the fleet," his tactical officer reported. "The humans are using some kind of viral attack on our computer systems. Our ships are turning their own weapons on each other." His blood ran cold. Computer viruses were considered a war crime by every civilized species in the galaxy. They were too dangerous, too unpredictable. A badly designed virus could spread beyond its intended targets and cause damage across multiple star systems. But humans, it seemed, had no problem with war crimes. Dr. Sarah watched the battle from her underground facility with satisfaction. The virus her team had developed was specifically designed to target Iran battle computers, turning their own tactical advantages against them. The virus didn't just disable systems, it actively rewrote targeting protocols to cause friendly fire incidents. It was psychological warfare on a level that most species couldn't comprehend. Humans understood that winning a battle was often less important than breaking the enemy's will to fight. "Phase 3 is ready for deployment," she reported to General. "Dr. Reeves' package is in position, and the neural disruptor network is online." Nodded grimly. Phase 3 was the culmination of humanity's defensive strategy, a coordinated attack that would demonstrate to any alien species that Earth was too dangerous to conquer, even if they could eventually win. In space was beginning to realize that he had made a terrible mistake. The humans weren't just defending themselves. They were teaching him and his species a lesson about the dangers of underestimating a seemingly primitive civilization. His fleet was being systematically dismantled by weapons that shouldn't exist, used in ways that violated every rule of civilized warfare. Worse, he was beginning to understand that this wasn't the humans' desperate last stand. This was them holding back. The real nightmare was just beginning. As the first part of humanity's response drew to a close, alien sensors across the solar system detected something that made their blood freeze. Deep space monitoring stations belonging to a dozen different species picked up quantum signatures indicating that humans were preparing to deploy something that registered on scales previously thought to be purely theoretical. Stared at his sensors in growing horror as he realized that everything his species knew about human capabilities had been wrong. The primitive chemical rockets, the basic kinetic weapons, the simple orbital installations, it had all been a facade. Humanity hadn't been preparing to defend Earth. They had been preparing to send a message to the entire galaxy about what happened when someone threatened their home world. And that message was about to be delivered in a way that would be remembered for 1,000 years. The package activated with no fanfare, no dramatic light show, no obvious sign that humanity had just changed the rules of warfare forever. Dr. Reeves watched his instruments from 3 miles underground as space-time itself began to bend around Earth in ways that made his own equations seem like children's drawings. Above the planet, Commander felt his flagship shudder as gravity fluctuated wildly. His artificial gravity systems screamed warnings as they fought to compensate for forces that shouldn't exist. Throughout his fleet, Iran warriors who had conquered 17 star systems found themselves pressed against bulkheads by gravitational fields that shifted direction every few seconds. "Status report," roared, struggling to remain upright as his bridge tilted at impossible angles. "Sir, the humans have somehow created localized gravitational anomalies throughout the solar system," his science officer reported, voice tight with panic. "Our navigational computers cannot compensate. The anomalies are moving, growing stronger, and they appear to be intelligent." That last word hung in the air like a death sentence. Intelligent gravitational anomalies were the stuff of theoretical physics nightmares, weapons that could potentially collapse stars or tear holes in reality itself. No civilization had ever been insane enough to actually build one. But humans was learning, had a very different definition of insanity. Dr. Reeves monitored the package's performance with the calm satisfaction of a master craftsman. The device wasn't just manipulating gravity. It was using quantum entanglement to create gravitational fields that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Each anomaly was controlled by a distributed AI network that could think, adapt, and coordinate with its siblings. The Orion fleet found itself trapped in a gravitational maze where the rules of physics changed every few seconds. Ships that tried to retreat found themselves pulled back toward Earth. Vessels that attempted to maintain formation were scattered by gravitational currents that behaved like living things. Weapons fired at human targets were deflected by gravity wells that appeared and disappeared with perfect timing. "This is impossible," his tactical officer whispered. "Gravitational manipulation on this scale requires energy output equivalent to a small star. How are they powering it?" The answer would have terrified him even more than the weapon itself. Humans weren't powering the gravitational anomalies. They were borrowing energy from parallel dimensions through controlled quantum tiers in space-time. Each anomaly was essentially a small black hole turned inside out, fed by the infinite energy differential between realities. It was the kind of technology that could accidentally destroy the universe if something went wrong. Most species would never develop it because the risk was too great. Humans had developed it because they were more afraid of losing their freedom than they were of accidentally ending existence. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, other civilizations were taking notice. On the hegemony's monitoring station at the edge of the Andromeda spiral arm, senior analysts stared at readings that made no sense. The quantum disturbances coming from the Sol system were registering on instruments designed to detect stellar-level events. "Contact the High Council immediately," commanded his assistant. "Tell them that humanity has just demonstrated weapons technology that exceeds our current understanding of physics." Similar conversations were taking place in the capital ships of a dozen major powers. The crystalline collective's hive mind processed the implications in nanoseconds and immediately placed all human space under diplomatic protection. The ethereal consortium's probability engines calculated a 97% chance that any attempt to conquer Earth would result in galactic-scale devastation. But the most interesting reaction came from the Ancient Archive, a mysterious organization of elder species that had been observing galactic development for millions of years. Archive Keeper Zephyr floated in her containment chamber, her energy-based consciousness analyzing data streams from across the galaxy. For eons, the Archive had watched young species develop along predictable paths: first fire, then agriculture, then industry, then space travel, then either transcendence or extinction. Humanity was the first species she had ever observed that had deliberately chosen a third option: weaponized insanity. "Fascinating," she murmured to her fellow keepers. "They have developed technology specifically designed to be too dangerous for anyone to oppose, including themselves. They have made their own survival dependent on everyone else leaving them alone." "Is that not simple mutually assured destruction?" asked Keeper. "No," Zephyr replied. "Mutually assured destruction requires both parties to have something to lose. The humans have created weapons that could damage the fundamental structure of reality. They are threatening to break the universe rather than accept conquest." Back at Earth, the battle had moved beyond conventional warfare into something that resembled a cosmic horror story. The Orion fleet was trapped in a bubble of distorted spacetime, surrounded by gravitational anomalies that seemed to take malicious pleasure in their confusion. Commander had commanded fleets for 40 years. He had faced plasma storms, quantum torpedoes, and reality-warping psionics. But he had never fought an enemy that could make gravity itself choose sides. One of his destroyers attempted to break free from the gravitational maze and was immediately caught by 3 intersecting gravity wells. The ship was stretched like putty, its crew experiencing time dilation effects that aged them decades in minutes before the vessel was finally compressed into a sphere of ultradense matter and ejected from the solar system at near light speed. Another ship tried to use its quantum tunneling drive to escape and discovered that humans had apparently found a way to seal off dimensional passages. The ship emerged from its tunnel 3 seconds in the past, arriving at the same coordinates it had started from and colliding with itself. "Sir," his communications officer reported with barely controlled hysteria, "we're receiving a transmission from the human planet." "On screen," ordered. General appeared on the, sitting calmly in what was obviously a military command center. Behind her, holographic displays showed the positions of every ship in its fleet, updated in real time despite their best electronic countermeasures. Commander said in accented but fluent Iran, I am General Sarah of Earth's Unified Defense Command. I believe we need to talk. His mandibles clicked in surprise. Not only did the human speak his language, but she had used his name and rank information that should have been classified at the highest levels of Imperial security. How do you know my identity? He demanded. We've been monitoring your communications for the past 6 months, replied matter-of-factly. We know the names, ranks, and personal histories of every officer in your fleet. We know about your military record, your family, and your species' cultural taboos. We also know that you're following standard Imperial doctrine, which means you probably view this as a routine conquest. Felt a chill run down his spine. If humans had been monitoring Imperial communications for months, they knew far more about the Iran Empire than anyone had realized. I am here to offer you a choice, continued. You can withdraw your fleet immediately and return to your empire with a full report of what you've encountered here. Or you can continue this attack and discover exactly how much damage an allegedly primitive species can do when they stop holding back. You dare threaten the Iran Empire? Snarled. His expression didn't change. Commander, in the past hour, your fleet has been immobilized by weapons that your science officers cannot understand, using technology that shouldn't exist. Your ships have been scattered across dimensions, compressed by artificial black holes and caught in temporal loops. And this is us being gentle. She leaned forward slightly. You invaded our star system with the intention of conquering our world and enslaving our people. You chose to threaten everything we hold dear. Did you really think we would respond with conventional weapons? As if to emphasize her point, one of his remaining cruisers suddenly vanished from the tactical display. A few seconds later, it reappeared as a shower of component molecules that sparkled briefly before dissipating into space. That ship was disassembled at the quantum level and reassembled as constituent atoms, explained. The process is painless but irreversible. The crew experienced no suffering. They simply ceased to exist in any meaningful sense. Stared at the empty space where his cruiser had been. Quantum disassembly was a theoretical possibility that most scientists refused to research, because it was too close to playing with the fundamental forces that held matter together. What are you? He whispered. We are a young species that has spent our entire history fighting wars against impossible odds, replied. We learned early that if you cannot be stronger than your enemies, you must be more frightening. We developed these weapons not because we wanted to, but because we had no choice. She gestured to the displays behind her, which now showed detailed technical readouts of Iran ship designs. Your species has grown comfortable with your technological advantages. You fight clean wars with predictable tactics because you've never faced an enemy desperate enough to break the rules of civilization. But humans have been breaking rules since we first picked up sharp sticks and decided to hunt animals 10 times our size. We've been finding ways to win fights we should lose for our entire evolutionary history. Did you really think achieving space travel would change that? Realized with growing horror that the human was right. The Iran Empire had become accustomed to conquering species that fought according to established galactic conventions. They had never faced an enemy that was willing to weaponize the fundamental forces of reality itself. What do you want? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. We want you to go home, said simply. Return to your empire and tell them what you found here. Tell them that Earth is protected by weapons that could unravel the fabric of space-time itself. Tell them that humans are willing to destroy the universe rather than accept conquest. And if I refuse? Smile was colder than the vacuum of space. Then you'll discover what happens when we stop playing defense and start playing offense. As if summoned by her words, new contacts appeared on sensors. Human ships were emerging from what appeared to be nowhere, materializing around his fleet in formations that geometry. These weren't the cobbled-together vessels from the first wave. These were sleek, alien-looking craft that seemed to bend light around them. Those ships are equipped with dimensional displacement drives, explained. They can exist in multiple realities simultaneously, making them effectively immortal. They're also armed with weapons that can edit the laws of physics in localized areas. One of the new human ships demonstrated by firing what appeared to be a simple beam of light at a Iran frigate. The beam struck the ship's armor, and the entire vessel began to age rapidly, decades of entropy compressed into seconds. Within moments, The frigate had rusted away to nothing, its crew dying of old age before they could even scream. "That's an entropy beam," said conversationally. "It accelerates the natural decay processes of matter. We have others that can reverse the strong nuclear force, cancel out electromagnetic interactions, or simply convince matter that gravity points in a different direction." Science officer was now openly weeping, his understanding of physics shattered beyond repair. Everything he had learned about the fundamental constants of the universe was apparently negotiable in the face of human engineering. "Why are you telling me this?" asked. "Why reveal your capabilities?" "Because," replied, "we want the rest of the galaxy to understand exactly what they're dealing with. We don't want to conquer anyone. We don't want to rule over other species or steal their resources. We just want to be left alone to develop in peace. But if someone forces us to fight, we will use every weapon at our disposal. And our disposal includes technologies that could accidentally erase entire star systems. We've accepted that risk because the alternative is slavery." She stood up and could see the weight of command in her posture, the burden of knowing that her decisions could affect the fate of civilizations. "You have 1 hour to withdraw your fleet from our solar system," she said. "After that, we will demonstrate what our more aggressive weapons can do. And Commander, our more aggressive weapons are considerably less gentle than what you've already experienced." The transmission ended, leaving alone with the impossible choice between retreat and annihilation. Around him, his fleet hung helplessly in the gravitational maze that humans had created, while weapons that shouldn't exist prepared to teach the galaxy a lesson about the dangers of underestimating a species that had survived by refusing to accept defeat. Commander sat in his command chair, staring at the tactical display with the hollow expression of a warrior who had finally encountered something beyond his understanding. His fleet, once the pride of the Oran Empire, now hung helplessly in space like insects trapped in an invisible web. The gravitational anomalies that surrounded them pulsed with an almost organic rhythm, as if Earth itself had developed a malevolent consciousness. He had 53 minutes to make a decision that would echo across the galaxy. "Sir," his communications officer said hesitantly, "we're receiving priority transmissions from the home fleet. Admiral is demanding a status report." Almost laughed. How could he possibly explain what had happened here? How could he tell the Admiral that their most powerful fleet had been neutralized by a species that still used chemical rockets? That humans had somehow developed weapons that treated the laws of physics as suggestions rather than absolute rules? "Open a channel," he ordered. Admiral's face appeared on the screen, her 4 eyes burning with impatience. Behind her could see the familiar bridge of the Imperial dreadnought Death's Edge, the most powerful warship in the Oran arsenal. "Your attack should have been completed hours ago. Why are you still in the human system?" Chose his words carefully. "Admiral, we have encountered unexpected resistance. The humans possess technology that was not included in our intelligence reports." "Impossible," snarled. "Our scouts confirmed that the humans are barely past their industrial phase. They have no weapons capable of threatening a Oran fleet." "Admiral, I respectfully request that you review the sensor data I'm transmitting now." His expression changed as she studied the readings. Her anger faded into confusion, then dawning horror as she realized what she was seeing. "These readings make no sense," she whispered. "Gravitational manipulation on this scale would require the energy output of multiple stars, and these other signatures, quantum disassembly, dimensional displacement, entropy acceleration. These are weapons that exist only in theoretical physics journals. The humans are real, Admiral, and they are more dangerous than any species we have ever encountered." Was silent for long moments, processing implications that threatened to shatter everything the Oran Empire believed about its place in the galaxy. "Withdraw your fleet immediately," she finally ordered. "Return to base for debriefing, and until we understand what we're dealing with, this information is classified at the highest levels. Tell no one." The transmission ended, but knew it was already too late for secrecy. Human technology had been demonstrated in front of a full Imperial fleet. Word would spread throughout the galaxy whether the Empire wanted it to or not. On Earth, General watched the alien fleet begin its withdrawal with a mixture of relief and exhaustion. The past 6 hours had been the most stressful of her life, knowing that a single mistake could have resulted in the destruction of her species. But the gamble had paid off. Humanity had successfully convinced a major galactic power that Earth was too dangerous to conquer. "General," Dr. Reeves' voice crackled through the intercom, "we're reading massive quantum fluctuations from the edge of the solar system. Something big is coming." Felt her blood turn to ice. How big? Bigger than anything we've ever detected. If I didn't know better, I'd say it was a mobile space station. Through the bridge windows of Admiral's dreadnought, the human solar system looked deceptively peaceful. The small blue planet rotated quietly in the void, giving no hint of the technological marvels hidden beneath its surface. But had studied the sensor data from S fleet, and she knew that appearances were deeply deceiving. "Admiral," her science officer reported, "we're detecting the same gravitational anomalies that trapped Commander's fleet. The humans are aware of our presence." Nodded, she had come here not to conquer, but to witness. The Oran Empire needed to understand exactly what kind of threat humanity represented, and that required seeing their capabilities firsthand. "Open a channel to the human planet," she ordered. General's image appeared on the screen and was struck by how young the human appeared. Most species didn't achieve interstellar capability until their individuals had measured in centuries. Humans seemed to accomplish everything with shocking speed. Admiral said, somehow knowing her name despite never having met, "I assume you're here to verify Commander's report." "I am," replied. "Your species has made some extraordinary claims that threaten to upset the balance of power in this galaxy." Leaned back in her chair. "We haven't made any claims, Admiral. We've simply defended ourselves against unprovoked aggression. If that threatens your empire's balance of power, perhaps your empire needs to reconsider its approach to diplomacy." Studied the human's face, searching for signs of deception or bluffing. What she saw instead was the calm confidence of someone who held all the cards and knew it. "Demonstrate," she said simply. Smiled, "What would you like to see?" "Your gravitational weapons. Our scientists claim that such technology should be impossible for a species at your level of development." "Impossible is a word we've learned to ignore," replied. She turned to someone off-screen and nodded. The effect was immediate and terrifying. Space Orcs' dreadnought began to warp visibly, stars stretching into streaks of light as gravitational fields twisted reality itself. The ship's massive bulk was lifted and rotated like a toy in the hands of an invisible giant. But what truly horrified was the precision. Despite the overwhelming forces at work, her ship's hull wasn't damaged, her crew wasn't harmed, and her life support systems continued to function normally. The humans weren't just demonstrating their power, they were showing that they had absolute control over it. "Acceptable?" asked as space returned to normal. His voice came out as a croak. "How?" 30 years of research by scientists who refused to accept that certain things were impossible, replied. "We discovered that the universe is much more flexible than most species assume. Physical laws aren't barriers, they're tools, if you know how to use them properly. But the energy requirements are met through dimensional shunting. We borrow power from parallel realities where the fundamental constants are different. It's risky but effective." Felt dizzy as she tried to process the implications. Dimensional shunting was pure theory, something that existed only in the most advanced physics journals. The idea that humans had not only figured out how to do it, but had weaponized it, was beyond comprehension. "What do you want?" she asked. "The same thing we've always wanted," replied. "To be left alone. We didn't ask to be discovered by your empire. We didn't ask to be evaluated as a potential conquest. We just want to develop our civilization in peace. But if someone threatens us, we will defend ourselves with whatever tools we have available. And our tools have gotten quite sophisticated lately." As if to demonstrate, new ships began materializing around the dreadnought. These weren't the crude vessels from earlier battles. These were sleek, organic-looking craft that seemed to bend light around them. They moved with impossible grace, defying inertia and momentum. "Those ships exist partially outside normal space-time," explained. "They can phase in and out of reality at will. They're also armed with weapons that can rewrite the fundamental constants of physics in localized areas." One of the ships fired a brief pulse at a nearby asteroid. The rock simply ceased to exist, not destroyed but edited out of reality as if it had never been there at all. "Quantum erasure," said matter-of-factly. We can delete matter from existence by convincing the universe that it was never created in the first place. The process is irreversible and leaves no trace. Stared at the empty space where the asteroid had been. Quantum erasure was the stuff of nightmares, a theoretical weapon that could potentially erase entire planets from existence. No species had ever been insane enough to actually build one. "You're monsters," she whispered. His expression hardened. "We're survivors, Admiral. We've spent our entire history facing extinction and finding ways to avoid it. We've fought diseases, natural disasters, ice ages, and each other. We've survived by being adaptable, creative, and absolutely ruthless when necessary. When your empire decided to conquer our world, you forced us to become something we never wanted to be. You made us into weapons against our own will. Don't blame us for becoming what you forced us to become." The truth of those words hit like a physical blow. The Iran Empire had created this situation through their own aggression. They had pushed a young species to develop weapons that could threaten the entire galaxy, simply because they couldn't resist adding another conquered world to their collection. "What happens now?" asked. "Now you return to your empire and tell them what you've learned," replied. "Tell them that Earth is under the protection of weapons that could accidentally destroy star systems. Tell them that humans are willing to risk universal catastrophe rather than accept conquest. And tell them that if they want to establish diplomatic relations with humanity, we're open to discussion. But any future contact will be between equals, not conqueror and conquered." Nodded slowly. The age of easy conquest was over. Humanity had changed the rules of galactic politics forever, demonstrating that even young species could develop technologies that threatened ancient empires. "I understand," she said, "but you should know that not all species will accept this new reality. Some will see humanity as a threat that must be eliminated before you become even more dangerous." Smile was colder than the space between stars. "Let them try. We've prepared for that possibility as well." As if summoned by her words, the space around Earth began to shimmer with new energy patterns. Deep space sensors across the galaxy detected quantum signatures that registered on scales previously reserved for galactic core events. "What you've seen today is our defensive capability," said. "What you're detecting now is what we've prepared for species that refuse to accept our right to exist." The energy signatures continued to build, reaching levels that made instruments scream warnings. Whatever humanity was preparing to demonstrate, it was orders of magnitude more powerful than anything they had shown so far. "We call it the Omega Protocol," explained. "If any species attempts to exterminate humanity, we will trigger a cascading quantum collapse that will spread outward from Earth at the speed of light. It will unravel the fundamental forces that hold matter together, essentially returning this entire section of the galaxy to the primordial state that existed before the first stars formed." His blood turned to ice. A cascading quantum collapse was the theoretical ultimate weapon, something that could literally end civilization on a galactic scale. The fact that humans had actually built one was beyond terrifying. "You would destroy yourselves to prevent conquest?" she asked. "If necessary, yes," replied without hesitation. "We've learned that freedom is worth any price, including our own existence. We will not be slaves, Admiral, not to your empire, not to any empire. And now every species in the galaxy knows it." The transmission ended, leaving alone with the knowledge that everything had changed. The age of empire was ending, killed by a species that had refused to accept their place in the galactic order. As her dreadnought began its journey home, composed her report with hands that shook from the magnitude of what she had witnessed. She would tell her superiors everything: the impossible weapons, the weaponized physics, the willingness to destroy entire sections of the galaxy rather than accept defeat. But she knew that the real message was simpler than any technical report could convey. Humanity had taught the galaxy a lesson that would echo for: never underestimate a species that has spent its entire existence learning how to win fights it should lose. The age of easy conquest was over. The age of humanity had begun. In the depths of space, monitoring stations belonging to dozens of different civilizations recorded the quantum signatures emanating from the Sol system and came to the same conclusion. Earth was no longer a primitive world ripe for conquest. It was a fortress defended by weapons that could threaten the fundamental structure of reality itself. And somewhere in the cosmic dark, Ancient intelligences that had watched the rise and fall of 1,000 civilizations took note of a young species that had chosen to weaponize the universe itself, rather than accept subjugation. The galaxy would never be the same,